Three siblings entered the lawyer's office as a family. Only one would leave knowing who they really were, because hidden inside their father's will was a secret that had been buried for more than 30 years, and the truth was worth far more than the inheritance. I have a question for you. If you discovered that the people you called family had been hiding a life-changing secret from you for decades, would you want to know the truth, or would you rather never find out? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about family secrets, shocking revelations, and powerful life lessons, subscribe to The Untold Cost. Because sometimes, the most expensive thing a family can hide is the truth. The rain fell steadily outside the law office. Inside, three siblings sat around a polished wooden table. Michael Turner, Sarah Turner, and David Turner. None of them had spoken much since their father's funeral 3 days earlier. The grief was still fresh. The pain was still raw. But if they were honest, grief wasn't the only thing sitting in that room. There was tension. The kind that builds slowly over years. Small arguments, old misunderstandings, silent competitions. The kind of tension many families carry but rarely talk about. Their father, Robert Turner, had spent most of his life building a successful business. He wasn't famous. He wasn't a billionaire. But he had built enough wealth to leave behind a substantial inheritance. An inheritance large enough that all three siblings knew their lives might change after today. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, then looked directly at them. "There is something you should know before we begin." Michael crossed his arms. "What is it?" The lawyer hesitated, as if he wasn't sure how to proceed. Then he opened a folder. Inside was a sealed envelope. Across the front were 6 handwritten words. "Open only." During the reading, Sarah frowned. "What's that?" The lawyer looked down. "Instructions left by your father." David forced a small laugh. "Sounds like something Dad would do." But nobody joined him, because something felt strange. Very strange. The lawyer carefully opened the envelope, then unfolded several pages. The room became silent. Even the sound of the rain seemed distant now. Finally, he began reading. "To my children." Sarah immediately lowered her eyes. Hearing her father's words after his death felt different, more permanent, more painful. "If you're hearing this, then I am gone," the lawyer continued. "Before my estate is divided, before any inheritance is distributed, there is something you deserve to know." Michael exchanged a glance with David. Neither looked comfortable anymore. "For more than 30 years, I have kept a secret from this family." The room froze. Sarah looked up immediately. Michael leaned forward. David stopped breathing for a moment. "A secret? What secret?" The lawyer continued reading. "I wanted to tell you many times, but every year it became harder, and every year I convinced myself there would be another chance." The siblings sat motionless. Nobody knew what was coming, but somehow, all three felt their stomachs tighten. "If you are reading this, then that chance never came." The lawyer turned the page. His expression suddenly changed. The confidence disappeared from his face. He looked shocked, almost disturbed. Michael noticed immediately. "What is it?" The lawyer didn't answer. Instead, he reread the paragraph silently, then looked up. "I think you should sit down." Sarah frowned. "We are sitting down." The lawyer swallowed, then spoke the words that changed everything. "According to your father's letter, one of you is not his biological child." The room exploded. "What?" Sarah stood instantly. David nearly knocked over his chair. Michael stared at the lawyer in disbelief. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Because suddenly, the inheritance no longer mattered. The money no longer mattered. The business no longer mattered. Only one question mattered. Who? Who wasn't Robert Turner's child? And why had he waited until after his death to reveal it? The lawyer slowly reached for a second envelope, an envelope none of them had noticed before. This one contained photographs, old photographs, and hidden somewhere inside those photographs was the first clue. But none of them were prepared for what those photographs would reveal, because Robert Turner's secret wasn't just about one child. It was about a decision made 32 years earlier, a decision that changed multiple lives. A decision that would force every member of the Turner family to question who they really were. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, the room felt frozen. One of them wasn't Robert Turner's biological child. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Sarah was the first to react. "This has to be a mistake." Her voice shook. "A horrible mistake." The lawyer remained calm. "I assure you it is not." Michael stood and began pacing. "No. This doesn't make sense. Our father would never do something like this." David looked pale, almost sick. Maybe he got confused near the end. The lawyer slowly shook his head. "The letter was written 8 years ago." The room became silent again. 8 years. This wasn't confusion. This was intentional. Robert had planned this. He had known exactly what he was doing. The lawyer reached for the second envelope, the one Robert specifically instructed him to open after revealing the secret. Inside were several old photographs, faded, worn, yellowed by time. The lawyer spread them across the table. The siblings leaned forward, confused. At first, the photos seemed ordinary. Family gatherings, birthday parties, vacations. Then Sarah noticed something. "Who's that?" She pointed toward a man appearing in several photographs. The lawyer examined the picture. The man stood beside their mother, smiling. Comfortable. Almost too comfortable. Michael frowned. "I've never seen him before." David picked up another photo. The same man appeared again, and again, and again, always close to their mother, always nearby, yet somehow never mentioned. The siblings exchanged nervous glances, because suddenly the photos didn't feel random. They felt deliberate, as if Robert wanted them to notice something. The lawyer unfolded another page, a note attached to the photographs. It contained only one sentence. "Start by identifying the man in these pictures." Sarah looked stunned. "Who is he?" Nobody knew, at least not immediately. Then Michael's eyes widened. His breathing slowed, and the color drained from his face, because he recognized something. Not the man. The location. One photograph showed a small lake. A lake Michael remembered visiting as a child. His father hated that place, refused to talk about it, refused to visit, refused to explain why, whenever anyone asked. Robert would simply say, "Some memories are better left alone." At the time, it made no sense. Now it suddenly did. The lawyer continued reading. "The answers you seek can be found in your mother's journal." The room fell silent. "Our mother's journal?" Sarah asked. The lawyer nodded. "It was left with the will." He reached beneath the table, then placed an old leather notebook in front of them. The notebook looked familiar. Sarah immediately recognized it. Their mother carried it everywhere, for years. Then one day, it disappeared. Nobody knew where it went, until now. David slowly opened the cover. Inside, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Private." For my eyes, only the date below nearly made him drop the book. 32 years earlier. The exact year Robert mentioned in his letter. The exact year everything apparently began. David carefully turned the first page, and immediately froze. Because the very first sentence read, "Today I met someone I should never have met." The siblings looked at one another. Nobody spoke. Nobody had to, because all three realized the same thing. The mystery wasn't getting smaller. It was getting bigger. Much bigger. And somewhere inside their mother's journal was the truth Robert had carried to his grave. A truth powerful enough to change their identities forever. David stared at the first sentence. His hands tightened around the journal. "Today I met someone I should never have met." The room fell silent. Sarah slowly sat down. Michael stopped pacing. All three knew they were about to learn something their mother never intended them to see. David turned the page. The entry was dated 32 years earlier. Their mother, Elizabeth Turner, was only 24 years old then. Recently engaged to Robert, excited about the future. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. The journal told a different story. Robert is a good man, kind, reliable, honest. The kind of man every parent hopes their daughter will marry. Sarah smiled slightly. That sounded like their father. Then David kept reading. "But today I met someone who made me question everything." The room grew quiet again. Michael folded his arms. He already knew where this was heading. And he didn't like it. The next pages described a man named Daniel Harper, the same man appearing in the photographs. According to the journal, Elizabeth met him at a community fundraiser. They spoke for only 15 minutes, yet somehow, those 15 minutes stayed with her. Then they met again, and again, and again. At first, it was innocent. Simple conversations, shared interests, unexpected chemistry, nothing more. But emotions don't always ask permission. Sometimes they arrive before we're ready, before we understand them, before we know the consequences. Weeks passed. The journal entries became longer, more emotional, more complicated. Elizabeth was torn. She loved Robert, or at least she believed she did. But Daniel made her feel something different, something she couldn't explain. Sarah wiped away a tear, because reading the journal felt strangely intimate, as if they were witnessing a private struggle, one their mother faced completely alone. Then David reached an entry written just 2 months before the wedding. And suddenly everything changed. Today, Daniel told me he loves me. Michael closed his eyes. No, David continued reading. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me wanted to stay. And part of me wished I had never met him. The room became painfully quiet. Because for the first time, they realized their mother's marriage almost never happened. Then Sarah noticed something strange. Several pages had been torn out, cleanly removed, deliberately. The journal jumped forward nearly 6 months. Straight past the wedding, straight past the period everyone needed answers about. Michael immediately noticed it too. Someone removed those pages. The lawyer nodded slowly. It appears so. David turned more pages. The entries resumed after the wedding. But Elizabeth sounded different, less joyful, less certain, more conflicted. Then he reached an entry that made his stomach drop. Today I discovered something that could destroy my marriage. Sarah gasped. Michael leaned closer. David read silently for a moment, then looked up. His face had gone pale. What is it? Sarah asked. David swallowed hard, then slowly answered. I think Mom was pregnant before the wedding. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because suddenly, Robert's final letter made terrifying sense. One of them wasn't his biological child. And somewhere in the missing pages was the answer to who. But the next journal entry revealed something even more shocking. Because Elizabeth wasn't the only person hiding secrets. Robert had known far more than anyone realized. And what he did next changed the course of their family forever. Nobody spoke. The journal sat open on the table. Today, I discovered something that could destroy my marriage. The sentence echoed through the room. Sarah felt her hands shaking. Michael stared at the page. David looked physically ill. Because they all understood what it meant. Their mother had been pregnant before the wedding, and now only one question remained. Who was the father? David continued reading. The entry was dated just 3 weeks after Elizabeth married Robert. I haven't told him yet. Every day I wake up hoping the fear will disappear, but it doesn't, because I don't know what to do. Sarah closed her eyes. Their mother sounded terrified, not dishonest, not manipulative. Terrified, the journal continued. Robert loves me. He deserves the truth. But I'm afraid the truth will destroy everything. The room grew silent. Then Michael noticed another folded paper tucked between the pages, carefully hidden. He removed it slowly. It wasn't part of the journal. It was a letter, addressed to Robert, but never mailed. The date matched the journal entry exactly. Michael unfolded it. His voice shook as he read. Robert, there is something I should have told you before our wedding, something I have been afraid to say. I recently discovered that I am pregnant. Sarah covered her mouth. David stared at the floor. Michael continued. And I don't know if the baby is yours. Nobody moved. The room became completely silent, because suddenly, the secret wasn't a possibility anymore. It was real, very real. Michael kept reading. I never wanted to hurt you. I never planned for any of this. But if I don't tell you now, I'll spend my entire life living a lie. The letter ended there, unsigned, unsent, never delivered. Sarah looked at the lawyer. So Mom never told him. The lawyer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the folder and removed another document, one left by Robert himself. A second confession, written years later. The lawyer unfolded it, then began reading. Elizabeth never gave me the letter, but I found it. The siblings froze. Robert found it? The lawyer continued. 3 months after our wedding, I discovered the letter hidden inside one of her books. Michael felt his stomach drop. Robert knew. For 30 years, he knew. The lawyer read on. I sat alone in our living room for hours. reading the same words over and over again. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely broken. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, because she could almost picture it. Her father alone, holding a letter capable of destroying his future. Then came the sentence nobody expected. I almost left. The room froze. Robert had considered ending the marriage. The lawyer continued. I packed a suitcase. I even drove away. But after an hour, I turned around. Michael stared at the page. Why? Why come back? Then the answer appeared. Because I realized something. I loved Elizabeth more than I loved my pride. The room fell silent. And whether that child was mine or not, the moment I chose to stay, I chose to become their father. Sarah broke down crying. David lowered his head. Even Michael couldn't hide his emotions, because suddenly, their father looked even bigger than they remembered. Not perfect, not fearless, but willing to stay when walking away would have been easier. Then Robert's confession revealed one final shock. He eventually learned the truth. He learned exactly which child wasn't biologically his, and he carried that knowledge for over 30 years. Without treating them differently, without loving them less, the lawyer slowly lowered the page. Then looked directly at the three siblings. Your father left instructions for the next envelope. Nobody breathed, because they all knew what was inside, the answer. The identity. The truth that would change one sibling's life forever. And when the envelope was opened, one of them would discover that the man they called Dad had made a choice decades ago that defined their entire life. The room felt smaller, heavier. The envelope sat on the table. Three siblings stared at it. Michael, Sarah, David. One of them was about to learn something that would change their life forever. The lawyer carefully picked up the envelope. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The sound of the rain outside seemed louder now, as if the world itself was waiting. The lawyer broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written entirely in Robert Turner's handwriting. He adjusted his glasses, then began reading. If you've reached this point, then you've already learned more about my marriage than I ever wanted my children to know. A sad smile appeared on Sarah's face. That sounded exactly like their father. The lawyer continued. You probably want an answer. You probably want a name. You probably want certainty. The room became silent, and after 32 years, I suppose you deserve it. Michael gripped the edge of the table. David stared at the floor. Sarah closed her eyes. Then came the sentence. David, nobody breathed. You are not my biological son. The room froze. David blinked. Once, twice, as if his brain refused to understand what he had heard. No, he whispered. No. Sarah immediately reached for his hand. Michael stared in shock. David slowly stood, then sat back down, because his legs suddenly felt weak. Everything he believed about himself had changed in a single sentence. The lawyer continued reading. I know this revelation may hurt. It may confuse you. It may even make you angry. You have every right to feel those things. David wiped away tears, because he did feel angry, confused, lost, all at once. Then Robert's letter continued. But before you decide what this means, you need to know something else. The lawyer turned the page. I discovered the truth before you were born. The room went silent again. Before he was born, Robert knew all along. I had months to decide what I wanted to do. Months to leave, months to walk away, months to choose myself. David lowered his head. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Instead, I chose you. Tears rolled down Sarah's face. Michael looked away. Even the lawyer paused briefly. Not because I had to. Not because anyone forced me. Because I wanted to. David could barely breathe. The first time I saw you, the question stopped being whether you were biologically mine. The only question that mattered was whether I could love you. The answer came immediately. Yes. David broke down. For years he had worried whether he was enough, whether his father was proud of him, whether he measured up. And now, he was hearing the truth. Robert had chosen him, every single day. For more than 30 years, the letter continued. Blood creates relatives. Love creates family. And from the day you were born, you were my son. Not partly. Not conditionally. Completely. Nobody in the room could hold back tears anymore. Then came the final revelation. The revelation Robert had hidden from everyone, including David. because Robert knew who David's biological father was. And according to the next page, that man had tried to find David years ago, a fact nobody knew. A fact that would force David to make the most important decision of his life.
David couldn't move. He sat frozen in his chair. For 32 years, he had believed he knew who he was. Then, in a single afternoon, everything changed. Not because Robert wasn't his biological father, but because Robert had chosen him anyway. And somehow, that made the truth even more emotional. The lawyer reached for another envelope, smaller than the others, older. The paper had yellowed with age. This was left specifically for David. David swallowed hard. For me? The lawyer nodded. It was your father's final instruction. Slowly, David accepted the envelope. Across the front were 5 handwritten words. Only if you're ready. The room became silent. Sarah squeezed his hand. Michael sat quietly beside him. For the first time all day, they weren't arguing. They weren't competing. They were simply family. But David opened the envelope. Inside was another letter, but this one wasn't from Robert. It was from someone else, someone he had never met. At the top of the page was a name, Daniel Harper. David frowned. The name meant nothing to him. But the lawyer immediately recognized it, because it was the same man from the photographs, the same man from Elizabeth's journal, the man David had unknowingly inherited his eyes from, his biological father. The room became completely still. David stared at the signature, then slowly began reading. Dear David, if you are reading this, then Robert has finally decided to tell you the truth. David's hands trembled. I have started this letter 100 times, and failed every single one. Because how do you write to a son who doesn't know you exist? Tears formed in David's eyes. The letter continued. And according to Daniel, he learned about David years after his birth. Not immediately, not during Elizabeth's pregnancy, years later, by accident. And when he discovered the truth, he wanted to reach out. He wanted to meet his son. He wanted answers. But then he met Robert, privately, man to man, father to father. The next sentence stunned everyone. Robert asked me one question. He asked whether contacting you would improve your life, or only satisfy my curiosity. David stared at the page. I couldn't answer. The room was silent, because the truth was, I wasn't trying to be your father. Robert already was. Sarah wiped away tears. Michael looked down, and David continued reading. A father is the person who stays, the person who shows up, the person who sacrifices, the person who loves you when nobody is watching. That wasn't me. That was Robert. David felt tears running freely now, because every word was true. Robert taught him to ride a bicycle. Robert attended his school events. Robert stayed awake when he was sick. Robert celebrated his successes. Robert comforted him through failures. Robert was his father in every way that mattered. Then came the final part of Daniel's letter, the part Robert wanted David to read only after his death. I never asked to meet you. Not because I didn't care, because I respected the life Robert built with you. But if one day you want to know me, the choice should be yours. David turned the page. A small card fell into his lap. It contained an address and a phone number, nothing more. Sarah looked surprised. He's alive? The lawyer nodded slowly. According to your father's records, he still is. The room fell silent. For the first time, David understood what Robert had been protecting. Not a secret, a choice. The choice to let David decide for himself. Then the lawyer unfolded the final page Robert had left behind. and what it said would bring the entire family to tears. David stared at the address, the phone number, the name. Daniel Harper, his biological father, alive. For 32 years, David never knew he existed, and now, he was one phone call away. The room remained silent. Nobody wanted to tell David what to do, because this decision belonged to him, and only him. The lawyer slowly unfolded the final page Robert had left behind. The last letter. The final words of the man who raised him, the man who chose him, the man he called Dad. The lawyer began reading. David, if you've reached this point, then you know everything. Or at least everything I was brave enough to tell. David lowered his eyes. You may be wondering why I kept this secret. You may even be angry. I understand if you are. The room was completely quiet. I considered telling you many times. When you turned 18, when you graduated, when you got married, when your first child was born. Each time, I convinced myself there would be a better moment. David smiled sadly. That sounded exactly like Robert, always waiting for the perfect time. The truth is, there was never a perfect time. Only difficult choices. The letter continued. I didn't keep the secret because I was ashamed. I kept it because I was afraid. Afraid that one conversation would make you question 30 years of love. David wiped away tears, because that's exactly what had happened, for a moment. Then Robert's next words changed everything. But love isn't measured by DNA. It's measured by presence, by sacrifice, by showing up. And if I've done my job well, you already know who your father is. Nobody in the room could hold back tears now. Even Michael looked away. Sarah quietly cried beside him. The lawyer continued. Daniel gave you life. I gave you mine. The room fell silent. David closed his eyes, because no words could have described it better. Then came Robert's final request. If you decide to meet Daniel, go with my blessing. Don't feel guilty. Don't feel disloyal. Wanting answers doesn't mean you love me less. David's hands trembled. And if you choose not to meet him, that's okay too. Because this isn't about me anymore. It's about you. Then came the final line. The final words Robert ever wrote. No matter what name appears on your birth certificate, you will always be my son. The room was silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Because there was nothing left to say. Only one thing left to decide. Weeks passed. David carried the address everywhere. In his wallet, in his car, beside his bed. Every day he looked at it. Every day he wondered. What would he say? What would he ask? Would meeting Daniel bring peace or more questions? Finally, one Saturday morning, he made a decision. Not because he was certain, because he realized certainty might never come. He picked up the phone and dialed the number. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered. Hello? David froze. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then David finally said, My name is David. Silence. A long silence. Then he heard something unexpected. A quiet sob. The kind someone makes when they've waited years for something they never thought would happen. David? The voice trembled. Is it really you? Tears filled David's eyes, because in that moment, he realized something important. Meeting Daniel wasn't replacing Robert. It wasn't choosing one father over another. It was simply understanding another part of his story. Months later, they met. Slowly, carefully, without expectations, without pressure, and over time. Oh, they built a relationship. Not father and son. Not at first. Just 2 people learning about each other. learning about the years they missed, learning about the life they never shared. And strangely, it brought David peace. Because the more he learned about Daniel, the more he appreciated Robert, the man who stayed, the man who sacrificed, the man who chose love every single day. The inheritance was eventually divided, the money was distributed, the business was sold. But years later, none of the siblings talked much about the inheritance. What they remembered was the truth, because that truth healed old wounds, brought the family closer, and reminded them of something priceless. That family is built by more than blood. It's built by love, by sacrifice, by showing up. A moral of the story: the people who shape our lives are not always the people we inherit our genes from. Sometimes the greatest parents are the ones who choose us every day. Love is not proven by biology. Love is proven by commitment. And the strongest families are built not by blood alone, but by the people who stay when staying is hardest. What do you think? If you were David, would you have contacted Daniel, or would you have left the past alone? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy emotional stories about family, secrets, forgiveness, and life lessons, subscribe to The Untold Cost. Because sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money, it's the truth.